I really hope my battery doesn't die. This shirt makes me feel like I need to go into the microwave to defrost. Hello there and welcome back to Cuckoo for Books. My name is Salva and today I'm going to be sharing the books that I read in the last quarter of 2019 to start off the new year. If you've watched my favorites of 2019 list, you will know that I spent a good 2 months of the year reading Kingdom of Ash by Sarah J Maas. This is the 7th book in the Throne of Glass series. It's a high fantasy series. You can watch my favorites list. I'm going to leave a link up above if you want to know more about it. Because it was such a thick book, I decided, you know, while I'm working on this, I like to do a bit of rereading on my Kindle or just revisit other books so I sort of get stuff done. So in the time it took me to finish Kingdom of Ash, I think I was able to read on my Kindle I think 3 or 4 books, and a lot of them will be mentioned in this here video. In my last video wrapping up everything I read this year, I mentioned that I read the first 2 books of the Mediator series by Meg Cabot, and this quarter I read the 3rd book, which is called Reunion. They're about this girl named Suze who has the ability to commune with the dead, and more importantly she helps them get on to their next life. So she finds out what their unfinished business is and helps them. It's a very serialized book. It's sort of like a crime of the week, murder of the week kind of vibe. It's just one of my favorite books to reread. Every 2 years I'll be like, I want to revisit that series. So this was the first book that I reread for the last quarter of 2019. The next book I reread while reading Kingdom of Ash was Inglorious Royal Marriages by Leslie Carroll. That is a mouthful. I love reading Leslie Carroll's books. She does historical fiction and nonfiction. Her historical nonfiction books are so rereadable. I don't know much about video games, but isn't there like a thing like, oh, its replay value is high, like once you finish it you'll want to replay it again and again. That's the equivalent of Leslie Carroll's books, and this in particular is about Inglorious Royal Marriages. So it covers about 500 years from the 1400s to the 1900s, and what I like about this book, you know, there were a lot of Notorious Royal marriages, which we'll get to in the next book. This book explores the lesser known Notorious or Inglorious Royal marriages. The figures in this book were mostly relegated to like the footnotes, or they're a side character in the big historical royal characters of history. Historical royal characters of history. How redundant. The forgotten siblings or the forgotten cousins who also contracted really bad notorious marriages for themselves. While still on the subject of Leslie Carroll, I also read Notorious Royal Marriages. This is a bit thicker, and this one does cover the more famous in the spotlight mainstream royal marriages. The Kindle version does include Harry and Meghan Markle's wedding, and so it goes into Charles and Diana, Henry VIII and his 6 wives. This was the first Leslie Carroll book I ever read. I don't like reading the physical copy I have because it's just about ready to fall apart, which is why I prefer to get a Kindle version. But oh, I'm not ready for her books to be over. I'm 3/4 of the way through rereading all her books, and now I'm like, I want to read more. I wish she would just keep writing because I would keep gobbling it all up. I really enjoy her books. The last sort of full-sized book I read for the months of October, November, December. Do I know my months correctly? Is that a quarter? Yeah, that's a quarter. But the last full-sized, full-length novel I read for essentially 2019 would be The Beautiful by Renee Audier. This also made my favorites of 2019 list. It's a murder mystery set in late 19th century New Orleans. There is a supernatural element to it, and I feel like as someone who thoroughly hated on Twilight back in the day because I thought it was cool, it wasn't. I feel like I'm getting a second chance to fall in love with vampire stories or the vampire mythology with The Beautiful. I really enjoyed it, and I love the heroine. She's one of my favorite YA heroines. It's a tie between her and Jude from The Cruel Prince. Then for the last quarter, I also read 3 novella-sized books, I guess is what you'd call them, but they're really thin. Well, I would say this is technically a full-sized book, but okay, let's start with this. This is The Silent Companions by Laura Purcell, also made my favorites list. So I would say this quarter has been a really good reading quarter for me because 3 of it made my favorites of the year list. There was one quarter earlier this year when I was just like, bleh. But this is a horror story. It's a story about this young widow who goes to the country manor of her dead husband while she waits for the birth of their child. There are these things called the Silent Companions in the house, and they start to follow her around, and their eyes move, and one eerily looks like her. And this book jumps between 3 time periods to help you figure out what the heck is going on. So there's a past, present-ish, and near future. I would love to see this made into a horror film. I think this would make a really, really good movie. I also read One Night at the Palace Hotel by Bianca Mori, and this was on my honorable mentions for the 2019 favorites list. It's a story of a Manila heiress, and on the night she's supposed to announce her engagement to this kind of boring, she's not really in love with him, rich dude, a blast from the past shows up, and now she has to decide. And it also features the bonus short story One Night in the Streets of Makati. That short story is about the heiress's best friend and her own, you know, tangle with love, and I really, really enjoyed it. I am so hyped to read the Alta anthology, which I guess is a spiritual successor of this book. Anyway, I read this and I am so glad I read it alone, because had I been reading it in public, I would have been blushing like mad because it's a very sexy book. For the most part this quarter, I've loved all the books that I've read, and I can't believe I'm saving the suckiest book for last. The last book that I read for this quarter would be Jeana and Lily Bet by Julia P. Ghilardi. If I made a disappointing reads of 2019 list, this would top it. Julia P. Ghilardi is a brilliant historian. She's published, I think, 3 or 4 full-length non-fiction biographies about historical figures, particularly the Romanov women, that I have loved and adored. They're such good reads, well-researched, and then I feel like this honestly was just a cop-out for money. I lent this to my mom before I read it, and then she was like, it sounds like it honestly was written for kids, and I was like, no, don't be silly, maybe it's just things you already know. I read it, it really does sound like it was made for kids, but saying that would be an insult to children, because it honestly felt like reading a Wikipedia article. Like, there was no voice to it. She was just rattling off facts. I don't know why there were so many grammatical errors in a published book, so I was super disappointed in this, because I think I can extensively say I know a good deal about Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth II, who are the focus of this book. I wanted to discover little known facts about them, but it just did nothing for me. It felt like reading a Wikipedia article. She's one of my favorite historians, and I love reading her books, and this was a terrible letdown. I can't believe I'm ending the video with that. That's so depressing. Okay then, cool. So that was a weird note to end on. I wish I calculated it better, but I guarantee we'll have more fun, upbeat ending videos in 2020, I promise. You can follow me on my other bookish adventures. On Twitter, I'm at Cuckoo for Books, and on Instagram, I'm at Cuckoo for Books, and also at Salva Villarosa. Please subscribe, and I will see you guys very soon. Bye, guys.